Okay, in this video I'm going to give you some tips of how to know whether to replicate some terms and which term to replicate if you want to minimize some Boolean expressions algebraically, right? So given this, this expression, that's a function consisting of three product terms, and the question is asking us to minimize this product terms and to find the minimum POS, minimum product of sum. Okay, so it explicitly wants the final answer on a product of sum form, right? So the way to tackle this problem is by taking a common factor, factoring out as many terms as possible. However, I need you to write down, first of all, I need you to write down this rule, which says that x plus y, x plus z equals x, okay, equals x plus y, z. So this is, if you distribute this x over the y and the z, which is the distribution property, you get this term. And if you expand these brackets, if you expand these parentheses, multiply everything and get 4 terms and reduce it, you'll end up with this property, with this term, x plus yz. So whenever you have x added to any other variable, multiplied by x added to some other variable, you can take the x as a common factor. You can factor out the x. Alright? And this is pretty much what we want to do here. Alright? We want to factor out something from these two terms. And we want to factor out something, so pick up 2 terms and try to factor out whatever variables that you can factor out, whatever common variables that you have. If you look at these two variables, the first 2 variables, you'll find that you have a is common and c is common. So you can factor out the a and the c. Alright? You also could factor out the a and the b bar from these 2 terms. Alright? So you can factor out two variables from these 2 terms if you work on these 2 terms together, or if you can work on these 2 terms together and factor out 2 variables as well. Alright? If you take these 2 terms, you'll find that only the a is common. The b and the c are not common. So it's very favorable to factor out as many variables as possible, and that's why it's not favorable to work on these 2 terms together. So you could work on these 2 and leave this as a 3rd term, or you can work on these 2 and leave this as a 3rd term. Right? However, you remember that you want the minimum term, the minimum expression to be on a POS expression, which means that if you work on these 2 terms, you'll find that this term is kind of stranded. Right? You won't be working on that term. You need to find a way to work on that term as well. Right? So it's very favorable to have 4 terms, not 3. Why? Because we want to operate on pairs of terms, 2 terms at a time. So we do not want to work on 2 terms and leave the 3rd stranded and not being worked on. Right? And so that's why it's very favorable to have even number of terms. And this is why we will think of replicating one of the terms. Why can we replicate? Because if we have x multiplied by y, this is the same as x multiplied by x multiplied by y, since x can take only the values of 0 and 1. Right? So we're going to figure out a way to pick up a term and replicate it. Okay? How can we do that? Well, if you pick up this term, you'll find that this term can be taken with that and can be taken with this. So that's why I'm going to pick up this term. So I'm going to write down a plus b plus c, a plus b bar plus c, okay? And then I'm going to replicate this term again, a plus b bar plus c, a plus b bar plus c bar. Okay? So right now I have replicated this term. This term is written down twice. Alright? And I'm sure that this expression is the same as this expression. I haven't really changed anything. Why? Because this parentheses could be a 0 and a 1. If you multiply it by the other, it doesn't really, if you multiply it by itself, it doesn't change the value. But why did I specifically choose this particular term to replicate because I know that this term can be taken with that term together to minimize them by factoring out two variables. If you take this term with that term, you'll be able to do that. However, if you replicate any other term, so for example, if you replicate this or replicate that, you guarantee that you won't have enough variables to take as a common factor. Alright? So, I'm going to group this together, and I'm going to group this together. Alright? If I take these two parentheses and try to factor out whatever I can, I'm going to factor out the A and the C. A. So A and the C becomes my X. Okay, A plus C is my X. And the Y and the Z are the B and B bar. Okay, so A plus C multiplied by B plus B bar. Sorry, multiplied by B plus B bar. Right? Again. So I'm going to work on A plus C, right? And then it is added to B bar. Okay? Yeah, so this follows this rule, right? Similarly, I'm going to take A plus B bar, and this is going to be my X. A plus B bar, right? So it says that this is A plus B bar, and the Y is C, and the Z is C bar. Okay, so it says add X plus YZ. So X plus Y, which is C bar. Okay, so again, in this step I have taken as a common factor A plus C, which is common in both terms, and I'm left with the two variables B and B bar. B ANDed with B bar. Okay, and similarly I've taken here A plus B bar. So when you look at this, you find that this is 0. Why? Because B multiplied by B bar is definitely 0. Either B is 0, and in that case B bar is 1. So B multiplied by B bar is 0. Or B is 1, and in that case also B bar is 0, because B bar is 0. The same goes for the C bar. So you end up with A plus C, A plus B bar. And this becomes your minimum POS, minimum product of sum. Okay? So, it's not always the case that you have a minimum product of sum. It's not always the case that you have to replicate a term. Sometimes, even if you have odd number of terms, you won't have to replicate a term. For instance, let me give you this as an example. Okay? So in that case, A plus B bar. Let me, before I write this down, if I'm given this expression, then I have three terms, yes. However, if I take these two terms together and try to reduce them, I'll be able to reduce them without the need of replicating this term. Why? Because why do I need to really replicate this term? If I need to replicate it, I need to replicate it so that I can take it with that term, associate it with that term, and thus do some sort of reduction. However, this is not really needed, because this already comes from two terms together. A plus, you can think of this as a reduced term, an already reduced term. See? A plus B bar plus C bar. You can think of this term as an already reduced term that comes from already two terms. So this expression is already on four terms. It has four terms. However, it's not explicitly four terms. Alright, and this is why I do not really recommend that you replicate this term. You won't end up with doing anything with this replica. Okay? So whenever you have three terms, and one of them is not really the same number of variables as the other two, then you do not have to replicate. That's not mandatory. Perhaps you might need to, but if you inspect it very well, you will not have to do that. Okay? And you will end up with A, right, plus B, A plus C, A plus B bar. Okay, and this becomes your final expression. If you were lucky and this was a C bar, okay, so this becomes C bar. If already the example was given like that, so that's kind of like a third example. If it was already a C bar, then you end up with A plus C bar. Okay? Which means that it can be reduced even further. A plus C bar, which is equal to A. And this becomes the minimum POS. Okay? So take it for granted whenever you have three terms, and one of them is not really doesn't have the number of variables as the rest of the terms, then take it for granted most likely we won't be needing to replicate any of the terms. In fact, actually, if you leave it as it is, you might be able to reduce it with the two other terms. And however, if you have the number of variables in all the terms are similar, are equal, number of variables are equal, and you have number of terms are odd, then in that case you need to work on pairs of terms, and this is why it is very favorable to replicate the terms. It makes your life much easier. Okay? If you have any questions, please let me know. Okay?